Now we're going to focus on the circulatory system. And the circulatory system is also referred to as the cardiovascular system. Remember, cardio refers to heart, and vascular refers to the blood vessels such as the veins and arteries. Now there's three major parts of the circulatory system. There's the heart, the blood vessels, and the blood. And we'll go deeper in future lecture videos about the pathway, about the specific parts of the blood. But for right now, we're just going to have a basic introduction of these parts. The circulatory system, basically, the purpose and responsibility of it is to circulate the blood throughout the body. Now, it is going to do other things, and we'll talk about that in just a second, but it is linked with the lymphatic system, which is going to help with immunity. Now, one of the things that I want to just make clear that the blood is not blue. The blood is red. It can be a dark red, a deep red. It can be a scarlet, bright red, but it's red because of the iron in the center of the red blood cell in the hemoglobin. So the heme, referring to iron, gives it its red color. Now, some blood vessels can look a bluish or purple color, but it is not going to be blue or purple from being deoxygenated. Now, as we said, we have the three parts of the circulatory system. The heart, which is the muscular organ made up of the cardiac tissue. Remember, the cardiac tissue has intercalated discs. Please go back and look at pictures of those because you will need to be responsible to know what cardiac tissue looks like. You will also need to be responsible for what smooth muscle and skeletal muscle looks like, as smooth muscle makes up blood vessels. Now, blood vessels are tubes that carry blood to the heart, lungs, and body. And blood vessels, as I just said, are made up of smooth muscle, but it's also made up of connective tissue as well. Now, blood vessels will include the arteries, the veins, and the capillaries. And then we have the blood, which consists of a fluid called plasma. We'll talk about that in a second. Red blood cells, which are erythrocytes, white blood cells, which are leukocytes, and then we have the platelets, which form the scab, and those are called thrombocytes. Remember, cyte means cell. And as we said, the function and purpose of the circulatory system is to transport and circulate blood throughout the body. There's a lot more, but there's a lot more to the circulatory system than that. It's going to, as it circulates, transport oxygen, nutrients, waste products, hormones, and those things can be consisting of, as we said, nutrients, could be glucose, amino acids. It can also transport the oxygen to the cells, so glycolysis in the Krebs cycle can occur in the ETC cycle. It will also transport waste, which would include ammonia. As we said, ammonia is going to be broken down in the liver and turned into urea, and then that's transported to the kidneys, and we're going to then, we said kidneys, ureters, urinary bladder, then urethra. So we'll get rid of that in urine. And it's also going to transport carbon dioxide out of the body as a waste product that we will exhale from the lungs. Now, the basic circulating fluid is called a blood flow. This blood flow is going to cycle throughout the body, going from the body cells to the heart to the lungs, and then lungs, heart, then body cells. And remember, the blood vessels are these pipe-like structures that will transport the blood, and the organ, the heart, is the one that pumps it, pushes it through. Now, not only that, we said that we have the immune system, as the circulatory system is closely intertied with the lymphatic system. So the blood cells, specifically the white blood cells, the leukocytes, are going to help in disease protection and healing. Now, the healing that can also tie in with the thrombocytes or the platelets. It will also tie in with the endocrine system, dealing with hormones or delivering hormones to different parts of the body. And then also, as the blood vessels dilate and constrict, it will impact body temperature regulation. Now let's talk about the heart specifically. It's about the size of your fist, a clenched fist. The heart does have 4 chambers. It is considered more of a hollow organ, and those 4 chambers are divided into 2 top chambers and 2 bottom chambers. In the 2 top chambers, you can think of the letter A for atria. And then the 2 bottom chambers look like a V. And those 2 bottom chambers are called ventricles. Now the atria receive the blood, and the ventricles will pump the blood out. So the ventricles will be the last ones to see the blood, it will get rid of the blood, and the atria will receive the blood. Now the base of the heart you would think is the bottom, but it's not. It's actually the top of the heart. It's the more broad and flat top portion. It is more posterior and superior, and it lies beneath the second rib. Now the apex is the point of the heart, and this is pointed to the left side. So this is the lower portion pointing to the left side of the body. So the apex of the heart points to the left. And the heart rests on the diaphragm. So it is located between the 2 lungs and rests on the diaphragm. And the word flanked refers to on either side. As you can see here, you can see the lungs. You can see how the heart is pointing to the left side of the body, and it's sitting on the diaphragm. You can also see the large blue blood vessels, which are called the vena cavas, and then the large red blood vessel, the one that curves, is called the aorta. Now the vena cavas are veins, so that goes to the heart, and the aorta leaves the heart. That's a large artery. This cardiac circulation you're going to need to know, and I'll give you a breakdown of that, especially from the lungs to the heart, then to the body cells, and then back to the heart, and then to the lungs. The carrying of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood, you're going to need to know that. Now, something to remember is that there's 2 separate pumps here. The right side of the body pumps blood from the heart to the lungs. So the right side pumps blood from the heart to the lungs. This is called pulmonary circulation. So pulmonary circulation is heart to lungs. Lungs to heart. That's pulmonary circulation. Now, the systemic circulation is going to pump it to the rest of the body. Now, the left side of the heart pumps blood to the rest of the body, and that's systemic circulation. So you can actually see in the heart, you see, so you can see the precava and postcava. That's from the vena cavas coming in, and then you have also the aorta, which is going to be on the left. Now, to the right of the aorta, you have your pulmonary artery. That pulmonary artery goes to the lungs, and then to the right of that, you have the pulmonary vein. So I'm not talking about the right side is only red and the left side is only blue. I'm talking about the left side of the heart, the precavas, and the aorta is closer to the left of the heart, while the pulmonary artery and pulmonary vein are more on the right side. Now, when we're talking about pulmonary circulation, systemic circulation, that's what we're focusing on. But if I'm asking for oxygenated versus deoxygenated, that would be what the color is representing. So the color is representing the deoxygenated blood. So you have the vena cavas from the body cells to the heart, and then the pulmonary artery from the heart to the lungs. That would be the deoxygenated. The oxygenated blood would be the pulmonary vein from the lungs to the heart, and then the aorta to the body cells. But don't confuse the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood vessels with what we're talking about here with the pulmonary circulation and systemic circulation. Now, pulmonary, remember, means lungs, while systemic means body. Here we have the breakdown. You can see the vena cavas on the left side, inferior meaning below. The superior vena cava is coming to the heart from above, and they're both coming into the heart. And you can actually see as they enter the RA, that's the right atria. Remember, we said the atria receives the blood. They go through the valves. Now, valves are set up that allow blood flow, but then they'll pinch back, preventing blood to go backwards. So valves are designed to prohibit backflow of the blood. So it moves into the right atria, then into the right ventricle. Then the right ventricle goes out. It says the PA, which is the pulmonary arteries, and those go to the lungs. Then we go to the lungs, and then we come back by the pulmonary veins, and then we enter the left atria, go through the valve, and then we're going to go into the left ventricle. Now, you don't need to know the names of the valves right now. We're going to focus on those in more detail in the next chapters. Then as we leave the left ventricle, we're going to go out the aorta, and that goes to the body cells, carrying oxygenated blood. So you can see on the right-hand side, we have the breakdown. Blood comes into the right atrium, as we said, from the vena cavas, which are the larger blood vessels, or larger specifically veins. Then the blood's going to move into the right ventricle, get pumped or pushed into the pulmonary arteries, which is to the lungs. And then after it picks up oxygen at the lungs, at the alveoli, it's by the capillaries. It's then going to take that oxygenated blood back to the heart through the use of the pulmonary veins. And that's going to enter the left atrium. Then it's going to go through the valve, the mitral valve, and into the left ventricle. And then it's going to leave the large artery, which is called the aorta. And here's a breakdown as well, showing you the valves that we'll have to learn later. Now let's talk about the blood vessels. We already said that the blood vessels are going to focus on arteries, veins, and capillaries. We said arteries carry blood away from the heart. We've already talked about this before. Now, primarily, arteries are going to carry oxygen-rich blood, but this is not in all cases. Now, this is except for the pulmonary arteries. Pulmonary arteries are going to carry oxygen-poor blood to the lungs to get that oxygen. But most arteries are going to be oxygen-rich. Now, they do have a thicker wall, and this helps with the blood contraction, pushing the blood through to withstand the pressure. And this is going to be made up of connective tissue, smooth muscle tissue, and endothelium. Veins, on the other hand, carry blood to the heart. And we said the main veins, or the largest veins, are the vena cavas. Now, these are going to carry oxygen-poor blood, and we said except for the pulmonary vein, which just refills oxygen. Now, the walls of the veins also contain connective tissue and smooth muscle. As we said just a little while ago, veins are going to have valves that are going to be very similar to what the heart valves are. This prevents backflow of blood, and then veins are primarily going to be near the skeletal muscle, which the skeletal muscle helps with pushing blood through the veins because this allows so the skeletal muscle will contract and squeeze the blood through. Now, the capillaries are smaller blood vessels. This connects the arteries to the veins. This is usually going to be at the cells. These are the smaller blood vessels where gas exchange is going to be passed to the tissues or from the tissues. So oxygen to carbon dioxide from the tissue. The walls are very small, only 1 cell thick. So that means the blood cells, the specific red blood cells, have to go single file through capillaries since they're so small. And here you can see the comparison between the artery as it's thicker and then the vein having the valves to prevent backflow. Here again is the vein going one direction. When blood gets pushed back, the valve will then close, preventing any blood to get pushed back. Now, if there are unhealthy veins, I think varicose veins are an example where there would be some backflow. We're going to talk about the different types of arteries in the future, but you can actually recognize some of these names that we learned with the muscles and the bones, such as femoral, tibial. We have some terms such as anterior, posterior as well, dorsal, plantar, and we'll learn some new terms as well. And you can see at the top, iliac, referring to the hip. And here again, we have the capillaries. Now, normal blood pressure or typical blood pressure is 120/80. That's a healthy blood pressure. It can be a little lower than that if you're very athletic. Blood pressure is regulated in two specific ways, and that's through neurotransmitters that cause the smooth muscle in the blood vessels to contract or relax. So our brain response. Kidneys also remove water from the blood. So if we have too much water or less water, that's going to impact the blood pressure. So water is removed from the blood when blood pressure is too high. So this will lower the blood pressure. So let's talk about the blood. The blood basically makes up 8% of the total mass of the body. Humans have about 4 to 6 liters of blood in the body, but there are 4 basic portions or parts of the blood. There's the plasma, white blood cells, platelets, and red blood cells. And in the diagram you see on the right, plasma makes up about 55%, white blood cells and platelets less than 1%, and then the red blood cells make up that 45% of the blood. That 45% of the blood. Now, there's a tool called the centrifuge. When your blood is taken, a test tube of your blood will be placed in the centrifuge. The centrifuge will spin around very fast, rapidly, and it will separate the plasma from the white blood cells from the red blood cells in your blood. So when we do separate the blood, we're able to see the plasma is this yellow or straw-colored liquid portion, while the rest more of a solid portion of the blood. So the plasma is about 90% water, and then about 10% would be waste and proteins and enzymes and hormones and salts and diffuse gases and different nutrients. But basically, we'll talk about this later on. The plasma is consisting of 3 different types of proteins called the albumin, the globulin, and the fibrogen. Now, the albumin is a protein made in your liver, and so this is going to help with carrying hormones and vitamins and enzymes. So we'll talk about these different proteins later, but there are specific jobs for these. Then we look at the white blood cells, also known as the leukocytes. These don't contain hemoglobin. These do not contain hemoglobin like the red blood cells do, and these are fewer than the red blood cells. Now, white blood cells are going to be produced in the bone marrow, and these actually fight diseases and different pathogens. Now, we're going to learn that there's many different types. There's basophils, there's helper T cells and B cells, all different types of white blood cells, leukocytes. So we'll talk about those later on. Now, platelets help clot the blood or help create the scab, and these platelets are going to help with preventing future blood loss. And another name for the platelets are called thrombocytes. Then we have the red blood cells, and as we said, the red blood cells are also called erythrocytes, and these do contain hemoglobin. This protein bonds to the oxygen and carries the oxygen. The center element of the hemoglobin is iron, and that gives us the red color in our blood. Now let's talk about some diseases. We're going to learn about some more than what I have here, but I'm going to give you a total of 6 diseases. And just as a reminder, since we said the circulatory system is also called the cardiovascular system, we're going to identify these as cardiovascular diseases. The first one is hemophilia. Now remember, hemophilia isn't necessarily a disorder with the heart, but we are tying this in with the heart, blood vessels, and blood. So this is a bleeding disease. This is an inherited disease in which we have a disorder of the thrombocytes or a clotting. So this is a deficiency in the clotting factor. So this yields an abnormal bleeding, so the bleeding doesn't stop. So even a bump or a fall will cause bleeding internally. So it's not just like I get a cut and then I just can't stop bleeding, but this can be an internal bleeding. There can be bleeding in the brain, causing neurological damage as well. Then we have hypertension, which is abnormally high blood pressure, and this is primarily caused by the forces that impact the heart to work harder and then weaken or damage the heart muscle because it's pumping so hard to push that blood through. This is more likely to develop a heart disease or coronary heart disease, increasing the risk of heart attack or stroke. And as we said, heart disease is usually caused by the narrowing of the blood vessels around the heart, leading to a heart attack. And this can be caused by plaque building up, and as we talked about, arteriosclerosis and atherosclerosis. And this can show signs of Now some of the symptoms might be nausea, shortness of breath, chest pain. And then we have an aneurysm. An aneurysm is a ballooning of the blood vessels. Usually this is happening in the abdominal aorta or arteries leading to the brain, and death usually results if the aneurysm is in a large blood vessel and the vessel then bursts. Arteriosclerosis, atherosclerosis, and hypertension will weaken the blood vessels over time, increasing the risk of the aneurysm. And as we said, atherosclerosis is when cholesterol builds up a plaque in the blood vessels. This can be in the vein or the artery. So if we're specifically talking about in the artery, that's going to be called arteriosclerosis. Now we're going to talk about 2 types of operations. You have the coronary bypass, which is basically an operation that involves removing of a segment of a blood vessel and replacing a clogged coronary artery. And so you can see in the diagram as we are skipping the blocked blood vessels and we are grafting veins to carry the blood from one portion or a lower portion to the aorta. So we are skipping the clogged blood vessels and going straight to the aorta. Now, gene therapy can be used to kind of stimulate new blood vessels to grow where the heart needs more blood flow. But then we have also an angioplasty. Now we also have angioplasty, which is using a long tube being threaded through an arm or leg blood vessel. So a long tube is threaded through, and then we have basically inflated balloon or inflating the tube, forcing the blood vessel to be pushed open. Then we have stents, which are small metal pieces that are expanded inside the artery to keep it open. These stents are coated with a hairpin chemical which prevents blood clotting. So this prevents the artery from closing in the future.